locked me inside. Please help me.
My name is Colonel Sarah
You chose
Miller.
the wrong
I am
daughter to
51
hurt.
years old, a career officer in the United States Army, and a mother before I am anything else. For most of my adult life, I believed the Army had taught me how to recognize danger. I had served overseas, walked through places where explosions could come without warning, and learned to stay calm when everyone around me was afraid. But nothing in my military career prepared me for the night I walked into a hospital in Charlotte, North Carolina, and saw my daughter covered in bruises shaped like someone's fingers. I was still wearing my Class A uniform when I left Fort Liberty. My jacket was pressed, my medals were straight, and my nameplate read Colonel Sarah Miller. I should have felt composed. Instead, I drove with both hands locked around the steering wheel while one sentence repeated in my head. Mom, please come. Don't call Richard. Just come. Chloe had left that message less than an hour earlier. She was 28, smart, independent, and usually careful with every word. She had married Richard Sterling 3 years before, entering a family whose name seemed to be printed on half the charity buildings in North Carolina. Richard's family had money, political connections, lawyers, private security, and a defense logistics company worth hundreds of millions of dollars. From the outside, Chloe's marriage looked like a fairy tale. That night, the fairy tale was bleeding. I walked through the emergency room doors and asked for my daughter. A nurse tried to stop me, but something in my face convinced her not to argue. She pointed toward a restricted hallway. I found Chloe curled beneath a hospital blanket. One eye was swollen nearly shut. Her lower lip was split. Purple bruises circled both forearms. Her white dress was torn at the shoulder and dirty along one side. For a second, I could not move. This was the same girl who used to call me during deployments, just to tell me what color the sunset was back home. But this was the child who once taped drawings of eagles to our refrigerator, because she said they would remind me to come back safely. Now she looked at me and whispered, "Mom." I crossed the room and held her. Her whole body shook. Then I heard a woman behind me say, "If she refuses to sign, doctor, I will authorize the transfer myself. She is clearly unstable." I turned. Richard Sterling stood near the door with his older brother, Carter. Beside them was Richard's mother, Beatrice Sterling. She wore diamonds, a perfectly tailored suit, and the cold expression of a woman who had spent a lifetime watching other people obey her. A nervous emergency doctor held a clipboard between them. Beatrice gave me a thin smile. "Colonel Miller, your daughter had an emotional episode. She fell on the terrace stairs. We are arranging private psychiatric care." I knew the facility she meant. Oak Ridge Institute was a secluded psychiatric hospital controlled by the Sterling Business Network. Chloe suddenly grabbed my sleeve. "No, Mom, please." They locked me in the guest house. Richard took my phone. He said if I tried to leave, they would tell everyone I was insane. Richard sighed as if my daughter were embarrassing him at a dinner party. "She is dramatic. She has always been dramatic." Carter laughed quietly. "Some people aren't built for this kind of family." I stood between them and Chloe. "Put the paperwork down," I said. Beatrice stepped closer. Her voice became softer, which somehow made it more threatening. "You are outside your world, Sarah. We have friends in courts, newspapers, and government offices. Your rank means nothing here." I looked at Richard. Then Carter. Then Beatrice. They thought my silence meant I was intimidated. That was their first mistake. Before entering the hospital, I had already called Detective Nora Wells, a Charlotte investigator I trusted. I had also forwarded a digital file to a secure contact. I did not tell the Sterlings any of that. Instead, I reached into my uniform jacket and took out my phone. "You want everyone to believe Chloe fell?" I asked. "Then listen." I pressed play. Chloe's frightened voice came through the speaker. "Mom, please pick up." I hid the phone under the bed. There was a crash. A door being forced open. Then Richard's voice exploded through the recording. "You think you're leaving me? I own this house. I own everything you have." Chloe cried out, "Richard, stop! You're hurting me." A heavy impact followed. Then Beatrice's voice, calm and clear, "Take her phone. Lock the guest house. If she talks, Dr. Evans can sign the psychiatric hold. By morning nobody will believe a word she says." The recording ended. Nobody moved. The doctor lowered the clipboard. Richard's face turned pale. Carter stopped smiling. Beatrice recovered first. "That recording is illegal." "No," I said. "What happened to my daughter is illegal." At that moment, a Detective Wells entered with 2 hospital security officers. "Mrs. Sterling," she said, "step away from the patient." Beatrice's expression changed. For the first time the polished mask cracked. She ordered Carter to call the lawyers. Then she looked at me and said, "You have no idea what you just started." I took Chloe's hand. "Yes," I said. "I do." What Beatrice did not know was that the bruises on my daughter were only the surface of the story. Chloe had not been beaten because of a marital argument. She had been beaten because she had discovered something powerful people were willing to destroy her to keep hidden. Within 20 minutes, the Sterling legal team arrived at the hospital. Three attorneys in expensive suits came through the emergency entrance as if they owned the building. A local television reporter followed them, along with a cameraman who immediately pointed his lens toward Chloe's room. I understood the strategy at once. If the Sterlings could not erase the evidence, they would poison the public story before the evidence had time to breathe. The lead attorney approached me with the kind of smile people use when they are about to threaten you politely. Colonel Miller, these accusations are extremely serious. We recommend that you stop before this becomes damaging to your daughter, your career, and the reputation of the United States Army. He called it a private family matter. I looked through the doorway at Chloe. She had pulled the blanket higher, as if the camera could somehow reach through the glass and hurt her again. Then Beatrice smiled. That was their real weapon. Not just money, not just violence, reputation. They believed they could make the victim look unstable, make the witness look vindictive, and make the truth look embarrassing. I stepped into the hallway. You are right about one thing, I told the lawyer. This is serious. Then I opened the door wider. Boots echoed from the far end of the corridor. Major Denise Calloway appeared first, followed by two military police officers. Behind them walked a federal cybercrimes investigator and Special Agent Claire Monroe from the Department of Defense Office of Inspector General. Claire carried a thick sealed folder. The reporter lowered his camera for half a second. Richard stepped backward. Beatrice stared at me. What is this? Claire answered before I could. Richard Sterling, she asked. Primary civilian executive for Sterling Defense Logistics. Richard tried to recover his confidence. This is a domestic dispute. The Department of Defense has no authority to involve itself in my marriage. The Claire opened the folder. This investigation began 6 months ago. The room changed. Even Beatrice stopped talking. Chloe slowly sat up in bed. Her face was bruised, but her voice was steady. I started it, she said. Richard stared at her. You. Chloe looked directly at him. Your company has been routing Department of Defense funds through fake veteran recovery programs. You used accounts connected to my charity foundation to hide transfers to shell companies overseas. Carter's face tightened. Beatrice whispered, "Be quiet, Chloe." But my daughter continued. For nearly a year, Chloe had managed a charitable foundation that helped veterans' families with housing and medical travel. At first, she believed unexplained transfers were accounting mistakes. Then she noticed the same vendor names repeating across different programs. Some of the organizations had websites but no real offices. Others were registered to mailboxes. Large amounts of money entered the foundation's accounts, remained briefly, and then moved again. She began keeping copies. Richard noticed she was asking questions. He told her the accounting was too complicated for her. Beatrice told her respectable wives did not inspect family business. Carter laughed and suggested she spend more time organizing galas. That only made Chloe more suspicious. 6 months earlier, she had quietly contacted General Nathaniel Sterling, Richard's grandfather and the aging founder of Sterling Defense Logistics. She also sent a limited packet of evidence to a federal reporting channel. That was why Claire Monroe already knew her name. But Chloe had continued searching because she wanted undeniable proof. That evening, she found it. A set of encrypted ledgers tied the shell companies directly to Sterling executives. She confronted Richard and told him she was leaving him and turning everything over to investigators. That was when the argument became a prison. Richard took her phone. Carter blocked the main driveway. Beatrice called a doctor connected to Oak Ridge. They moved Chloe to the detached guest house and locked the door from outside. What they did not know was that Chloe had an older backup phone hidden beneath the bed. She used it to call my secure number and left the recording playing. When Richard returned, the phone captured everything. Richard suddenly lunged toward Chloe's bed. He did not make it 2 steps. One of the military police officers moved in front of him and pinned him against the wall. "Do not approach her," the officer said. Beatrice shouted, "You are framing my son." Claire did not raise her voice. "No, Mrs. Sterling, your family is under investigation for possible theft of federal funds, contract fraud, and obstruction. Tonight's assault may have created several additional charges." The television camera rose again. This time, it was aimed at Richard. I watched Beatrice notice the red recording light. For the first time, she looked afraid of the same thing she had planned to use against Chloe: public attention. By midnight, federal vehicles surrounded the Sterling estate. Investigators executed warrants at the mansion, the corporate offices, and 2 private storage facilities. News vans gathered outside the gates. Her reporters who had once praised the Sterling's charity dinners were now asking why money intended for wounded veterans had vanished through offshore companies. Chloe remained in the hospital. I stayed beside her. At 2 in the morning, she finally asked me the question she had been too ashamed to ask before. "Mom, how did I let it get this far?" I squeezed her hand. "You didn't cause this," I said. "You were gathering evidence while surrounded by people who were trying to control you." She stared at the ceiling. Then she whispered, "There's more." I leaned closer. Chloe touched the empty place at her neck where she usually wore a small silver locket I had given her when she was 10. "They don't have the real files," she said. My pulse changed. "Where are they?" She looked at me for several seconds. "With the one person Richard thinks is too old to fight back." The next morning, the Sterling family tried to rebuild its wall of power. Their attorneys released a statement claiming Chloe was emotionally unstable and that the federal investigation was based on stolen, misunderstood financial records. Commentators appeared on local television asking whether I had used my military position to interfere in a private dispute. Anonymous sources described Richard as a respected businessman and Chloe as a troubled wife in the middle of a marriage breakdown. It was exactly the kind of attack I expected, but this time Chloe did not hide from it. From her hospital room, with stitches in her lip and bruises still dark on her arms, she gave a sworn statement to Detective Wells and Special Agent Monroe. She described the guest house, the locked door, the threats, the false psychiatric plan, and the financial records she had found. When she finished, Claire asked the same question I had asked the night before: "Where is the complete archive?" Chloe looked at me first. Then she said, "General Nathaniel Sterling has it." Nathaniel was the aging founder of Sterling Defense Logistics, a respected veteran whose name had become the foundation of the company. In private, however, the family treated him like an antique. Months earlier, when Chloe first noticed the missing money, as she secretly visited Nathaniel at his country property outside the city, she expected him to dismiss her. Instead, he listened. According to Chloe, he spent 2 hours studying the documents, then asked precise questions about account numbers, contract codes, vendors, and dates. His hands shook with age, but his mind did not. He told her, "Do not accuse them yet. Bring me proof they cannot explain away." That advice had protected the investigation, but it had also kept Chloe inside the Sterling household longer than any of us would later wish. Over the next months, she copied more records. She discovered that fake recovery programs existed mainly on paper. Money allocated for wounded service members was diverted through consulting contracts, international subsidiaries, and family-controlled foundations. She also discovered something more personal. Richard had forged her authorization on several transfers. If the scheme collapsed, he planned to claim Chloe had managed the charity accounts and acted without his knowledge. She was not just a witness. She was intended to be the scapegoat. That realization was what finally convinced her to leave. Federal agents tried to contact Nathaniel that morning. No answer. They drove to his residence. He was gone. Beatrice's attorneys announced that Nathaniel had been moved for urgent medical treatment because of advanced cognitive decline. They refused to disclose the facility. Chloe sat upright when Claire told us. "He is not confused," she said. "They're hiding him." The possibility turned the investigation into a race. If Beatrice controlled Nathaniel's medical paperwork and power of attorney, she could try to discredit anything he had approved. If she convinced a court that he lacked capacity, she could challenge his corporate decisions and block investigators from accessing protected records. For the next 2 days, attorneys fought over records while federal investigators traced company devices and searched offices. I remained mostly at Chloe's side, but I could feel the pressure building around us. On the 3rd evening, Claire arrived with new information. A private physician named Dr. Eris Thorne had signed an affidavit declaring Nathaniel severely impaired by dementia. The document had been created after the raid. "That is impossible," Chloe said. "He knew every account number I showed him." Claire nodded. "We are checking the doctor. But the defense will use the affidavit at the preliminary hearing." The hearing was scheduled for the next morning. I tried to persuade Chloe to stay home. She had been released from the hospital only hours earlier. Her face was still swollen and she tired easily. She stood in front of a mirror and carefully covered the bandage on her lip. "No," she said. "I want them to see me. Chloe. I spent 3 years making myself smaller so Richard would not get angry. I spent months pretending not to understand what I was seeing. I stayed quiet while his mother told me what to wear, where to sit, what charities to support, even which friends made the family look respectable. She turned toward me. If I hide tomorrow, the Beatrice will think the guest house worked. I had spent my career teaching soldiers that courage was not the absence of fear. Standing in that room, I realized my daughter already understood the lesson. The next morning we entered the federal courthouse together. Chloe wore a simple dark suit. I carried my uniform jacket over one arm, and eventually draped it across her shoulders because the hearing room was cold. Across the aisle sat Richard Carter and Beatrice. Richard looked exhausted, Carter looked furious. Beatrice looked almost untouched. Her black suit was perfect, her posture was straight. Her lawyer, a ruthless corporate litigator named Malcolm Vance, whispered confidently into her ear. When Judge Harmon entered, everyone stood. The government presented photographs of Chloe's injuries, the hospital record, the audio from the guest house, and the first financial links between Sterling Defense Logistics and the shell companies. Then Vance rose. He called the investigation emotional. He called the digital files unreliable. He suggested I had turned a family dispute into a federal vendetta. Then he held up a sealed document. Your Honor, he said, the true founder of Sterling Defense Logistics, General Nathaniel Sterling, cannot verify any of these allegations because he is medically incompetent. Beatrice looked directly at Chloe and smiled. Vance opened the affidavit. He has advanced dementia. The lawyer continued. Mrs. Beatrice Sterling holds lawful medical authority and operational control. The judge began reading. For one terrible moment, I understood their plan. They were going to erase the old man's credibility, take control of the company, and describe Chloe's evidence as the fantasy of an abused wife and a senile founder. Then the heavy courtroom doors opened behind us. Every head turned. An elderly man entered slowly with a mahogany cane. Beatrice stopped smiling. I recognized General Nathaniel Sterling immediately. He was thinner than the photographs displayed in Sterling Defense Logistics headquarters, and age had bent his shoulders, but there was nothing uncertain about his eyes. He crossed the courtroom slowly, deliberately, while two military attorneys and an older medical officer followed behind him. Beatrice stood so quickly her chair scraped across the floor. Nathaniel, she said. You should not be here. You're confused. We need to take you home. He walked past her without looking at her. He stopped near Chloe, removed his hat, and faced the judge. Your Honor, he said, before this hearing continues, I owe that young woman an apology. The room became completely still. Beatrice tried again. Nathaniel, please. He turned then. My mind is not gone, Beatrice. His voice was rough, but every word landed clearly. One of the people behind him stepped forward. Nathaniel explained that he had spent the previous 48 hours undergoing an independent neurological evaluation, arranged through military medical channels. He had documentation showing that he did not suffer from the advanced dementia described in Dr. Thorne's affidavit. Judge Harmon looked toward Vance. The lawyer's confidence disappeared. Nathaniel continued. The medical statement submitted on my behalf is false. I did not authorize it. I did not meet with Dr. Thorne for the examination he claims to have conducted. Beatrice's face lost color. The judge asked the clerk to mark the affidavit for investigation. That was the first crack. Then Nathaniel created the second. He reached into his jacket and removed a small silver locket. My breath caught. I knew it immediately. I had bought that locket for Chloe at a county fair when she was 10 years old. It cost less than $20. She had worn it for years, even after marrying into a family that treated inexpensive things as if they were contagious. Richard used to joke that it looked cheap. Beatrice once told Chloe not to wear it at a gala because photographs would last forever. Chloe kept wearing it. Nathaniel placed the locket on the judge's desk and opened it. Inside the hollow casing was a tiny storage device. Richard leaned forward. For the first time since the assault, I saw real disbelief on his face. Nathaniel explained that Chloe had spent months copying encrypted financial records from Richard's private files. She had stored the most important archive inside the locket, because nobody in the Sterling family considered it valuable enough to inspect. The thing they mocked had carried the evidence past them every day. Federal investigators had already created a forensic copy before the hearing. Claire Monroe stood and confirmed that the archive contained account records, internal emails, contract identifiers, and transfer instructions linking multiple Sterling executives to the suspected fraud. Vance objected. Judge Harmon overruled him. Then Nathaniel looked at Richard. My grandson, he said. Who's the name of wounded soldiers to steal money? Richard shook his head. Grandfather, you don't understand what you're seeing. I understand numbers. Nathaniel replied. I understand contracts, and I understand betrayal. He turned toward Carter. You helped hide it. then toward Beatrice. And you taught them that money would protect them from consequences. Beatrice stood, furious now. You are destroying your own family? Nathaniel's hand tightened around his cane. No, I am refusing to help you destroy what our family was supposed to stand for. His voice broke slightly when he looked at Chloe. He admitted that she had come to him 6 months earlier. She had shown him the first suspicious transfers. He had asked her to continue carefully while he verified what she found. I thought caution would protect her, he said. But my delay left her inside that house with people who already suspected her. I will regret that for the rest of my life. Chloe's eyes filled with tears, but she did not look away. Then Nathaniel removed one more document from his jacket. This one changed everything. A month earlier, after verifying enough of Chloe's evidence to believe the fraud was real, Nathaniel had amended the Sterling family trust and the voting structure attached to his controlling shares. The amendment contained a misconduct clause. If company executives were formally identified by federal investigators as participants in theft or fraud involving defense funds, their voting authority would be suspended pending adjudication. Temporary controlling authority would transfer to an independent trustee and to the whistleblower designated in Nathaniel's amendment. That whistleblower was Chloe. Beatrice whispered, and Nathaniel faced the judge. I would rather lose the company than let thieves use my name to hide behind soldiers. Judge Harmon studied the trust documents and then recessed the hearing while clerks verified them. For 40 minutes, the nobody at the defense table spoke. When court resumed, the judge announced that the documents would be preserved and reviewed in conjunction with the federal investigation. He also referred the questionable medical affidavit for immediate inquiry. Then came the decision on release. Because of the assault evidence, the alleged attempt to force Chloe into psychiatric confinement, the risk of evidence destruction, and the new financial records, Judge Harmon denied Richard's request for release and imposed strict restrictions on Carter and Beatrice, while federal prosecutors sought additional orders. Richard was taken into custody. As deputies approached him, he looked at Chloe with a mixture of rage and disbelief. You planned all of this, he asked. Chloe stood slowly. No, she said. I planned to tell the truth. You planned the rest. Beatrice turned toward her. You think you won? She said. You have no idea what it takes to run this company. The board will never follow you. Chloe touched the silver locket now resting again in her palm. I don't need them to follow me today, she answered. I just need them to stop following you. I watched Beatrice's expression collapse. That was the moment she finally understood. The family had spent years teaching Chloe that she had no power. All the while, she had been quietly collecting the truth that would take theirs away. The weeks after the hearing were not simple. Real justice rarely arrives in one dramatic moment. It comes through interviews, subpoenas, forensic audits, medical examinations, court motions, frightened witnesses, and long nights when people wonder whether telling the truth was worth the cost. Chloe had those nights. She woke from nightmares about the guest house. Sometimes a slamming door made her freeze. Sometimes she reached for her phone just to make sure nobody had taken it. But every morning, she kept going. She met investigators. She worked with accountants. She reviewed records she had once been afraid even to open. She filed for divorce. She obtained protective orders. And most importantly, she stopped apologizing for surviving. The Sterling Empire began to separate into two things that the public had once confused: the company Nathaniel founded and the people who had corrupted it. Federal auditors identified millions of dollars that had been moved through shell organizations and false veteran support contracts. Several executives began cooperating. A finance manager admitted that Carter had ordered him to alter descriptions on transfers. A former assistant produced emails showing Beatrice's office had coordinated with Dr. Thorne before the false medical affidavit was submitted. Dr. Thorne eventually admitted he had never performed the examination described in the affidavit. That confession destroyed what remained of Beatrice's claim that Nathaniel was incompetent. The board suspended Richard and Carter. Beatrice was removed from operational roles while the investigation continued. Under the trust amendment, Chloe and an independent fiduciary received temporary voting control over the family's dominant shares. Beatrice had spent years calling Chloe decorative. Now Chloe sat at the head of the same boardroom where men once asked her to leave before serious business began. Her first meeting lasted 6 hours. She did not fire everyone. She did not sell the company. She did not waste time making speeches about revenge. Instead, she ordered a full independent audit. She froze questionable accounts. She created a protected reporting system for employees. She suspended contracts connected to the fraudulent charities and instructed counsel to cooperate with federal investigators. Then she did something Beatrice never expected. She protected the innocent employees. Thousands of people work here. Chloe told the board. They did not commit these crimes. That we are going to repair this company without punishing people who came to work and did their jobs honestly. And Nathaniel watched from the end of the table. His health was failing, but his eyes shone with pride. Months later, the criminal cases moved forward. Richard faced charges connected to the assault, unlawful confinement allegations, obstruction, and financial fraud. Carter faced financial and conspiracy charges. Beatrice faced charges tied to obstruction, the attempt to manipulate Nathaniel's medical status, and her role in the broader scheme. The exact legal process took time, but the mythology of the Sterling family was already dead. Money had not made them untouchable. Connections had not erased the recording. Lawyers had not been able to turn bruises into a fall down the stairs. One afternoon, as Chloe and I left a courthouse conference, Beatrice was being escorted through a separate corridor. She stopped when she saw us. For a moment, we were back in the hospital again, Beatrice upright, polished, certain she could control the room. But now there were no assistants around her. No reporters waiting for her instructions. No son standing between her and consequences. She looked at Chloe. You ruined this family, she said. Chloe did not raise her voice. You keep saying that because you need me to be the villain, she replied. But I didn't steal from soldiers. I didn't forge records. I didn't lock anyone in a guest house. Beatrice's jaw tightened. You took everything. Chloe shook her head. No. You risked everything because you thought nobody could stop you. Beatrice was led away. Chloe watched her go, but there was no triumph on my daughter's face. That surprised me. I had imagined revenge as a moment when the person who hurt your child finally feels fear. But Chloe taught me that real revenge can look quieter. It can look like refusing to become what hurt you. 8 months after the night in the hospital, autumn settled over North Carolina. Chloe returned to the Sterling estate. This time, she did not enter through the side door as Richard's wife. She arrived as chairwoman of a reorganized board, accompanied by legal counsel, contractors, and representatives from veterans organizations. The detached guest house still stood at the edge of the property. I hated looking at it. That building had been designed for comfort. Stone fireplace, polished floors, expensive furniture. But to me it was a cell. Chloe walked toward it and stood outside for a long time. Are you sure? I asked. Yes. The demolition crew started that afternoon. Wall by wall, the guest house came down. Chloe watched until the room where she had been locked was nothing but broken wood and dust. Then she handed the architect a new set of plans. On that exact ground, she would build a recovery and legal advocacy center for abused military spouses, wounded veterans, and families trapped by financial dependents or powerful abusers. It would have private counseling rooms, legal offices, emergency housing connections, secure communication stations, and gardens open to the sunlight. Why here? A reporter later asked her. Chloe answered, because I want the worst place in my life to become the first safe place in someone else's. I heard that sentence from the back of the room. And I realized something. The Sterlings had tried to write the ending of Chloe's story for her. They wanted it to end with silence. Instead, she was building a place where other people could find their voices. The new center opened on a cool October morning. By then, lawyers, reporters, and investigators had repeated the story many times. Some focused on the recording, some on the raid, and in others on the silver locket or Nathaniel's courtroom appearance. But when I think about what happened, I remember smaller things. I remember Chloe's hand shaking when she grabbed my sleeve in the hospital. I remember the way she said, I want them to see me. Before the hearing. I remember her standing outside the guest house before the demolition crew began. And I remember the first survivor who walked through the doors of the new center. The building was filled with natural light. The counseling rooms looked warm instead of clinical. There were private offices for attorneys and advocates, a secure room where people could make calls without being monitored, and a garden with benches beneath young trees. Above the main entrance, Chloe placed a bronze plaque. It read Neonanias Teopoarfpe Hales Hisuntle. I stood beside her in my dress uniform while cameras flashed. General Nathaniel Sterling arrived in a wheelchair. His body was weaker, but his mind was still sharp. Chloe handed him the ceremonial scissors. His hands trembled, so she placed her hands over his. Together they cut the ribbon. Nathaniel cried openly. I should have acted faster, he told her quietly. Chloe knelt beside his wheelchair. You acted when it mattered, she said. And now we make sure the next person does not have to wait. That was Chloe. She had every reason to become bitter, but she chose purpose instead. Later that afternoon, after the reporters left and the first guests began touring the building, Chloe and I walked toward the garden. She still wore the silver locket. Richard and Beatrice had mocked it because it was inexpensive, and now it had become a symbol of the case. Chloe touched it and smiled. I almost stopped wearing this because they made me feel embarrassed, she said. I remember. They were embarrassed by anything they couldn't put a price on. We sat on a bench beneath a young maple tree. After a few moments, Chloe leaned her head against my shoulder. I thought calling you that night meant I had failed, she whispered. I thought I should have been strong enough to get out by myself. I took her hand. No, sweetheart, calling for help was not failure. She looked at me. I had spent decades in uniform. I knew what backup meant. Nobody survives every battle alone. Soldiers call for support because survival matters more than pride. Calling for backup is not weakness, I told her. Sometimes it is the first move that changes the whole battle. She wiped a tear from her cheek. For the first time in years, she looked like the daughter I remembered. Not because the scars had disappeared, but because fear no longer controlled the shape of her life. She was not untouched. She was not unscarred. But she was alive, free and finally in control of her own future. When I look back now, this is how I understand the story. My daughter married into a powerful family that believed wealth gave them permission to control people. When Chloe discovered evidence that Sterling Defense Logistics was moving federal defense money through false charities and shell accounts, she quietly collected proof. Richard Carter and Beatrice tried to stop her. Richard assaulted her. They locked her in a guest house, took her phone and planned to label her mentally unstable so nobody would believe her. But Chloe had hidden a backup phone. Her call captured their threats. She reached me. I reached law enforcement and federal investigators. The secret investigation she had already helped begin moved into the open. Then the Sterlings tried to save themselves with the same tools they had always used: lawyers, media pressure, political connections, and a false medical claim against their own family patriarch. That failed too. A General Nathaniel Sterling appeared in court with proof that his mind was sound. He revealed that Chloe's complete evidence archive had been hidden inside the silver locket they had mocked. He also revealed that he had changed the family trust so that corrupt executives could lose control, and the whistleblower could help protect the company. The people who tried to erase Chloe ended up exposing themselves. And the place where they tried to imprison her became a center designed to help other people escape abuse and find legal support. That is the part I hope people remember. The lesson is not that every victim needs a powerful parent, a secret federal investigation, or a dramatic courtroom reveal. The lesson is simpler. Control survives in silence. Abusers often depend on isolation, shame, fear, and the belief that nobody will believe the person they hurt. A power becomes more dangerous when everyone around it decides not to question it. Chloe changed her future when she documented what was happening, trusted the right people, and finally asked for help. I also learned something as her mother. I could protect her in the hospital. I could stand between her and Richard. I could call investigators and refuse to be intimidated. But I could not heal for her. Chloe had to reclaim her own voice, make her own decisions, and decide what justice would mean after the cameras disappeared. Her revenge was not becoming richer than Beatrice. It was not watching Richard lose his freedom. It was not sitting in the chair at the head of the Sterling boardroom. Her deepest revenge was building a life they no longer controlled. They tried to turn her into a frightened woman nobody would believe. She became the reason other frightened people could be heard. And if there is one line I will carry with me for the rest of my life, it is this. The Sterlings believed they had chosen a daughter they could break. What they really chose was the woman who would expose them. And the mother who would never let them bury the truth. Thank you for watching and for staying with me until the end of this story. If this story kept you listening, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who enjoys powerful stories about survival, justice, and finding the courage to speak. Your support helps us bring you more stories like this. And remember, asking for help does not make you weak. Sometimes it is the moment your real freedom begins.